Okay, and we're back. So that was cool. I didn't have to delete an old video or anything. Anyways, so we were talking last episode about, well, what we talk about in a lot of these: substance use, substance abuse, crime and punishment, um, criminal justice, all of these different ideas and topics. But basically, a politician has to get your vote one way or the other, and one of the common ways is, oh, I created all these jobs. And so, but then you got to be like, okay, well, where did those jobs come from? What are those jobs? You know, and I don't know. And I remember reading about how Trump gutted a lot of like our response to pandemics and like some science agencies and things like that. And I even had someone, when I was discussing things on the X app, post this meme about 97% of scientists don't want to be defunded. And it's like, well, if you get that in your mind, how messed up? Like, what if they're really working on some groundbreaking stuff? Now, granted, they might not be. They might be working on, how can we add preservatives to a food and still call it a food, even though it's technically more flame retardant or yoga mats or something. Like, that's how a lot of science, unfortunately, is done because a lot of companies are selling food and they need it to last. They need to not have too many losses and spoiled food, but at the same time, create a healthy and tasty product that their customers are going to want to come back and eat. And fast food, just the way the American life is with the hustle bustle and the go go go. And mind you, any country would come to that same conclusion as humans will. Like, if any group of people ended up being colonists, like in a place like America, almost the exact same thing would have happened. And we're finding this out, which makes it easier to get upset about when people are dying, which is good. I mean, if I was in any of these countries that America has been invading over the last 20 years, or actually since 200 years, I mean, I was looking at timelines like the actual amount of times that America has been at war, it's insane. Like, also, where did my. Oh, okay, there it is. I was like, where did my chest go? It's just downright wrong. Like 20,000. I was bringing that up last episode. 20,000 people dead. Like that's. Let's see. My hometown had a population of about 2 to 5,000. So that's like what, four Buena Vistas killed, gone, dead. Like they no longer walk this earth. That's messed up. That's like, oh, shoot. I was wondering why it was going so fast. Oh well. That's because I wasn't collecting the ice. Oh well. And each one of these is going to be significantly reduced, but we're getting so much. I mean, this. My goal is to replace, or at least have a railway for all the places that we have in blue ice. So let's see if we can get that. So I don't know, but that's why you need to be able to criticize your own camp because, like, to speak out against the Democrats, even though I'll still probably vote Democrat every time, but I'm gonna have some questions and concerns. Be like, hey, what are you doing for this, or why are we not doing this? Like the biggest thing, and now we're giving a bunch of money to Israel, and no, I'm not okay with that either because what Israel is doing to Gaza. Like there are thousands of people dying for. Yes, it was like 2,000 people that died in Israel from that brutal attack, and it was. And nobody's saying that it wasn't a brutal attack, and it needs to not ever happen again. But the punishment needs to fit the crime. Like, and I've been seeing that with Israel all the time. There's tons of political cartoons about how, Gaza fires like one little rocket, it fizzles and maybe hits the ground. Like, oh my gosh, they're attacking. And then they just launch all these like very expensive, very fancy, better rockets that kill and destroy all these other things. And it's like maybe that'll teach them not to send their little rocket. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, if a mosquito comes and bites you, well, I guess that's a bad analogy because you would go and attack the mosquito nest and try to stop it all. But these aren't mosquitoes; these are people. I don't know. But it's a lot like 9/11 in the U.S. Like we got into a 20-year war or military occupation of the Middle East, which was way worse than Russia did with Ukraine, by the way. I mean, for every finger we point at Russia for invading Ukraine, what happened when we invaded Afghanistan, Iraq? We dropped bombs. We had whole armies over there. We were boots on the ground, like thousands and thousands of soldiers walking around killing people, like anybody that they thought was Taliban, even if they thought. Like they didn't have to actually be. That's why we get those 20,000 civilians that are reported to not have really any military involvement, but are dead. You know, I don't know. Enough about that. My point is, it's like you can't just blindly follow anybody. You have to be able to criticize and critique your own camp. And that's, I feel like Joe Biden needs to answer to all the money to Ukraine and all the money to Israel, especially if it comes out, if it's true that Boris Johnson tried to, or told Zelensky not to negotiate all that like 18 months ago in this 2-year war, then all of those lives lost are on him directly, and then in whoever put him up to that, which I hate to say it is probably our government, probably Biden, so, and I think a lot of that is because it's good business to have wars going on. Like, we have a lot of companies in America that's their business models. They make weapons of death for the sole purpose of killing or destroying things. Like, bombs don't plant flowers, they don't grow food, they blow things up. Like, that's their purpose. So, I mean, if we turned around and took our 800 billion, see, I'll say that again, $800 billion every year is what we invest in our military. You imagine what we could do with that? Like, if I had just had 1 billion, I could probably fix homelessness. Like, and not homelessness forever, but like all the people currently living on the streets, and again, it's hard, it's a moving target too. Like, it's not fair to say, like, these homeless people, like, it's not who they are for a long period of time. Most of them, it's just a transitionary period while they're having a rough time. Usually they're 20s, maybe 30s, and then they get it either figured out, or people lapse somewhere in their life. Like, I've seen a bunch of older people out on the streets where it's like they just kind of gave up. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna just drink for a while and just have a party and have fun, like, and it is fun for a while, and then they're like, oh crud, now I can't get back out of it. And and thankfully we're doing more things like legalizing mushrooms. I mean, instead of pushing antidepressants, which could actually cause suicidal thoughts and depression with the remedy, like that is fighting fire with fire. Like, you're trying to fix a fire by using a flamethrower. Like, it's not a good idea. Now, however, mushrooms, which, thanks to Reagan and his oopsie that he did with the cartels and cocaine, like, now all mushrooms are now illegal and stuff, and any substance that the DEA deems dangerous, which, and when we banned alcohol, we had an amendment to ban it. We didn't have an amendment to ban cannabis, mushrooms, ecstasy, any of these things. Like, and again, I'm not saying that they're good, but I'm just saying they shouldn't be prison sentences. Like, save prison for people who kill people, who attack people. If you punch somebody, yeah, you should go to prison for a few weeks. Like, in fact, I think it should be stiffer penalties on assaults. Like, if you actually got into a fight with someone, you should go to, like, or at least jail for, like, a couple months. They're like, okay, do you want to do it again? Are you going to do it again? Or are you going to think about that next time you do it? That's what we should be using jails and prisons for. And also, prison sentences, that's the other thing, is like they come with numbers. So you get a DOC number. And if you have a DOC number, guess what? You're not going to get a good job for about 10 years, is the average. So you're gonna have to work minimum wage jobs or whatever place will take you, and you have to hang your head low and be like, "Yeah, I messed up," and all this ridiculousness. And it's like, no, for what? For partying? For stuff that movie stars and politicians and, like, I mean, I've heard stories about how George Bush Jr. did coke in college, like, and then didn't dawn on him to maybe be like, you know what, this stuff isn't great for you, but it's not going to kill you. I mean, well, that could kill you. Cannabis, even. Cannabis hasn't killed anybody by itself. Oh, sorry, I never finished that thought. The soldier was talking about 300 deaths related, and it was like 280 something, so it wasn't even a full 300, but like 300 deaths, we'll say, we'll round it up to an even 300, have died because of cannabis. Now, driving, I think, was most of it. And it could still cause health problems. You're inhaling a smoke that adds tar to your lungs. I'm not saying it's perfectly harmless. Nobody is. But when compared to alcohol, which can actually cause cirrhosis of the liver, um, weight problems, weight gain, depression, because then you're getting chubby and, like, and you keep drinking, you lose days, like, and then, and it gives you the shakes, and it makes you, like, if you start using too much alcohol, then yeah, it gets really bad. Or you could have depression and suicide, like, you could die that way. Now, and that's the blood of Christ. For all these people, claiming Christianity and, like, Christian nations, or, one nation under God. Like America has been a Christian nation, whether you like it or not. It's heavily influenced by it. Now, thankfully, a lot of people are waking up and being like, you know what? No, let's keep that separate, as the founding fathers intended. There's like a letter and people talking about it, like even though religion is good and morals should be taught, it has no place in government because, and this is another thing I loved about the Putin interview. Tucker even asked Putin, he's like, "Do you see any of this stuff as like other than human, like divine intervention or like being done by God?" And he thought about it for a sec. He's like, "No, I don't think so. Like this seems all human made. Like this is all localized. So even if there was a God somewhere floating out there, like Putin even said, and this was another way. It was like, wow, that's refreshing. Like that is so refreshing because I worry about people being like, oh, this is the divine will. This is God's will. Like, all these people dying and starving and living in the streets and all this bad stuff. It's like, no, that's not from the book that I read growing up. Like, that's quite the opposite, actually. Jesus wandered around and healed everybody, prostitutes, criminals, like all that. And then that's another thing too, sex work. Prostitution should not be demonized and illegal. Like, it shouldn't be glorified either. But again, we're putting people in jail or prison for making money somehow that we don't really care for. But how is that really fixing the problem? You're putting them in a horrible position, and then, because people joke about it, Grand Theft Auto, like, like running over prostitutes and stuff and getting money back and all that. And like, but then when you think about it, like, no, this is just people, young people living their life, having fun. What we should be doing is making sure it's safe. Contraceptives, medical visits, making healthcare affordable for everybody. And we do have free clinics, so thankfully there are things like that. But at the same time, young people are going to do what they do. Let's make sure they don't have diseases and stuff, and they're safe. Like that's what we should be doing. But instead, oh wait, you made money off of this? Off to jail you go. And it's like, really? Like that seems so inhumane. Like, or something else that pops up in conversation is, like Muslim countries will kill you for being gay, or throw you off a building for being gay, or cut off your hand for being a drug dealer, or even kill you for being a drug dealer. Well, guess what? Trump wants to bring back the death penalty for drug dealing, and death by cop is a very real thing. I've looked that up before, and just like how many people have died from police interaction, when normally, and again, the law enforcement doesn't want to be doing this. Like they just want to go home to their family. They don't want to get shot or attacked or have to be spit on or all of the number of nasty things that can happen when they have to enforce nonsense laws. Like, oh, you got a little baggie of powder, you're coming with me. Your life is pretty much ruined for the next few years, but I want you to be calm and peaceful while I put these metal handcuffs on you, restrain you so you can't even move your arms, and then if you fall, you can't catch yourself, so you're going to get hurt that way. And then if you fight back or do anything, you could die. You could get killed, murdered by the police, whether indirectly or directly. In fact, that's what all the BLM riots were about, and protests. Sorry, there was riots and there was protests. Let's not kid ourselves. But the peaceful protests for Elijah here in Colorado, specifically Denver, were a bunch of sit-ins where they just refused to leave, but they weren't causing any trouble, so they couldn't remove them. So because it wasn't a riot and it was such a peaceful protest, it would have made Martin Luther King Jr. proud. Like it was perfect. And it got laws passed. Like cops were no longer had blind immunity when someone died in their care. Now, and I talked to one of my cop buddies after that. He hated it because he's like, you know what? That's how we do our job. Like if we could be charged with murder for these things, there goes a lot of our, but rightfully so. It's like, okay, now, I mean, but either way, he's right to a point, but at the same time, we shouldn't get to the point where it's a life or death situation for anybody involved. And now that the cops are, it's a little risky for the cops too now, not just for people making poor decisions, you know. Yeah. So we need to get to a point where people aren't risking years of their life for a substance. And we're getting there. Colorado is one of the forefront of that. Like we have a lot of community corrections. We legalize mushrooms. We legalize weed. We legalize DMT, which is another plant-derived uh, chemical that can cause hallucinations. Very brief hallucinations. I don't know about any lasting effects, but I mean, and we can study this stuff now and actually get answers and figure out, okay, how dangerous is this stuff really? I mean, but before that, it was illegal to test mushrooms because if you had mushrooms, it's like, oh no, but you got these. Well, I'm not using them or selling them. Yeah, but you have them. Okay, and it's again, it's like, how dangerous is the substance? You're acting like it's some kind of nuclear material, or something or poison, when in reality, if it was ingested, it would cause some craziness for like 6 to 8 hours tops, and then nothing. Okay. Or if you get caught with it, it could be 6 to 8 years if you really fight it. If you do a plea deal, it'll get down to like 2 or 3 years of probation, but that's 2 or 3 years that you have to pay $10 to $15 every time you drug test, which could be 5 days a week, it could be 2 days a week. Either way, it could be $30 or $90 every week. So we're looking at $120 to $360 about for every month. And you multiply that by 2 or 3 years, that's how much money that and you can't get a good job because you have a criminal charge now, so you have to work at like a fast food place. Oh, and don't you dare try to use any more drugs while you're on it because we'll know, and you'll just you see, like, it's really easy to get caught up, and that's why we have a revolving door of justice, like where people just keep going back and forth in the system, is because they don't ever really fix the behaviors or stuff until they just age out of it. And the prefrontal cortex is fully developed in your mid to late 20s. So once a person is mid to late 20s, they're a lot less likely to even go out and use these substances. But then they're also getting older to the point where it's kind of weird seeing someone like that out in the party scene anyway. So then it's like, okay, that's more for young people making poor decisions and learning from it. Like, it's human nature. So I don't know. And I like the quote from Scarface, like, you need the bad guy. Everybody needs a bad guy. You need to be able to point and say, that's him. That's the bad guy. And that's so true. Like, yeah, he was doing a lot of bad things in that movie, but it's because we have this need, the whole superhero idea. Like, superheroes are fighting crime, and then those criminals are just like career criminals. Like, they're just out there to like hurt people and steal and rob. And yes, there were people like that. We call them politicians. But no, when I was in Malaysia, I toured a mafia house. It was considered a mansion, even though, like, by today's standards, I don't know if I'd call it a mansion. I know some people growing up that had a house like 3 or 4 times as big as that, and he just sold computers for Gateway, like, and then he had a furniture store, and he was a big Catholic family, which it'd be interesting to talk to that whole family. That was like my best friend growing up, and his 2 sisters and one brother. They had 4 kids, and like, it was a huge Catholic family that they did pretty well for themselves, and I don't know. And then here I am over here trying to use my Red Key USB to get computers to people. I just met someone who helps Spanish-speaking families in northern Colorado get connected to the internet and like do their troubleshooting and their IT work and stuff. And I talked to him. I'm like, hey, I want to try to get some computers to these people too. And now, and once I get my car, because I'm getting a car now, that's my next big expense. But I'm gonna have a couple $100 a month. I think that I could maybe, or at least some money a month, even if I just did like $50 a month, choose not to go out to eat a few times, like, because that's about the same amount. And then if I could just save that up in a little fund and then start even just buying new computers from Walmart, they're only like 2 or 300 bucks, and they do everything you need to get a job, to do education. Like, you only need a web browser anymore. You don't need a really powerful computer. Granted, that's not fun for games, so I want to try to still do computers that you can run at least Minecraft on, which is pretty lightweight. I mean, although I say that, but I think you need, like, every computer I've played it on had 16 gigs of RAM. The computers that I can't play it on had 4 gigs of RAM. So I think you just need, yeah. So Walmart computers might not be the best for games. In fact, they're not good for games. But then there you go. If you can get even the family a job to where they can support themselves and have their own money coming in, because everybody would rather do it themselves. Like, these little helper projects are just that. They're temporary fixes. They're band-aids. Like, these computers are not meant to be your permanent computer, but they're saving them from the landfill or however they're processed. Like, people or companies are supposed to ethically recycle their tech. Some do, some don't. It's like, I don't know. Just taking all this ice. We got quite a bit of blue ice from this already. Let's see. Kind of stacking some change. Of course, that's still only going to be, each map probably takes about 3 stacks, I would say. Because it's like 1,000 blocks, but then you divide that by 8, and then you need that many, and you only need about half of the length because you're doing every other one. So it's like ice, no ice, ice, no ice. and then you're running along the top of it with a boat. Still cracks me up for just like taking away this entire. I mean, it doesn't. I like these ice spikes biomes. They're pretty neat. Like, we need it. So, anyways, I'm gonna do some more discussions on the X app, but I'm wanting to see. I can't wait to see Biden's reaction to the interview. I want to. I mean, I don't watch a lot of speeches from any candidate or any politician because they're boring, and a lot of times I don't believe half of what they say, and I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds great, but really, although I will say the things that I do support about Biden is he wants to close tax loopholes, he wants to fix the tax issues and the huge wealth inequalities that we have that Reagan broke. I mean, the taxes went down from a 70% tax, and it was even higher than that. I was looking at a timeline the other day, and I might need to fact check that, of course, like everything, but according to this website I was looking at, the taxes for the highest tax bracket used to be 90% because if you were making so much money, you didn't need to be making any more money. Like most of that was going back to this country that, you know, paid police to keep you safe, paid emergency people to keep you safe, like and healthy, and all this. And the streets that you drive on, the infrastructure, the bridges, like those are really expensive things. They cost a lot of money and yet you got to use them to do what you need. I mean, are you going to pay for a bridge? No. Well, that's why you pay taxes. So, are you going to pay for climate change research? Well, no, but that's why you pay taxes. Or not, because Trump gutted a lot of those programs. And then, and we even have. Okay, so this was another thing that came up in debate recently. There was an ExxonMobil study in the 70s where they found that climate was going to change. They proved it through science. And they're like, okay, so they had these studies, and then they spent a bunch of campaigns saying the exact opposite, lying, basically, like, oh no, this isn't going to do this, even though we know with scientific observation that yes, this is going to happen. So they lied, they defrauded people to keep their business going, and a lot of people's livelihoods and income. So I'm not saying like they're evil people and they're gremlins or demons or anything. They were just people that didn't want to go do some other things for a living, and were looking out for their. And again, Breaking Bad with Mike Bennick or Tom Bennick. Anyways, I don't even know what his first name is, but Bennick. He had a company, a fabrication, like I mean, they make metal things, like probably stairwells or bridges or whatever. They make some civil engineering projects. Doesn't matter what they did. They had a business, and he did tax fraud to try to keep his business afloat. His dad passed away, who was running the Bennick company, and then he inherited the company, and it almost went under. Like, and he constantly says, I'm looking out for my employees, people's pensions. That's some kids' college fund. Like, these are families, what families rely on. And that's the part of the Republican Party that, yes, there is some sanity in there. They are trying to look after their companies and stuff, and taxes are a little bit aggressive that way. And that we need to adjust them and address them. And so I can understand and sympathize why a lot of this tax issue is an issue. However, when I see people like Trump worth billions of dollars, I think he's like worth $3 billion. That's insane. Nobody should be worth $1 billion. I'm sorry. Like that's nobody. And he's taking care of his family, which is pretty screwed up and like destroyed with all this. I mean, well, not destroyed beyond salvage, but like they got some problems. And they're even making millions and millions of dollars off of all of these things that normal people like you and I would never be able to do. A lot of us probably would do a lot of the same stuff had we gotten the green light to be like, okay, go make this company, and you're going to make this much money, and cool. And then you get to pick and choose which philanthropy you want to do. And Trump does donate a lot of money to charity. Like, I'd have to look up specifically, but I mean, some of the hot water he's in was because he defrauded a charity that he did. Um, but it would be interesting to see how much he's actually given to charity. Like I know he didn't take a paycheck when he was president, so okay, that's cool. But then if you look at the fine print, and there's always fine print, there's always a trick or a scam. Like almost everything in capitalism is a scam, or like trying to get one over on you. And if you don't read the fine print, then you could get scammed, or not necessarily even an outright scam. You could just not be expecting that. So anyways, back to the Trump thing. He got caught defrauding one charity, and he was funneling some of the money back into, I think, his campaign. But it was supposed to go to like sick kids with cancer or something like. But okay, but he was doing a charity, and it wasn't all the money. I think, like, and he paid it back too. Like he was ordered to pay it back. Um, so right there, if you don't have all the facts and you just say he defrauded a charity, then it's like, oh crud. No, he's like put his hand in the pockets of some cancers, victims, some kids with cancer or something. Like it looks really bad. But the reality of it is he had already raised, hundreds of thousands of dollars for this, whatever, or even donated so much money. But then he took some and put it towards his campaign and his legal fees too. I'm sorry, that Jean Carroll or whatever, is horrible. Like millions of dollars for sexual assault that happened way back. I'm not saying it's okay to sexual assault, but holy cow, millions of dollars. And then you get Brock Turner raping chicks behind a dumpster, and like because he doesn't have millions of dollars, that girl's never gonna see that kind of money. Like she's gonna be more scarred, or they're all scarred. I'm not saying like it's okay by any means, but millions of dollars. I will never see a million in my life probably. And this lady just got 8. And now they're talking about her getting 80. Now, and I hope she does something noble with that money, but she's not going to do it with all of it, you know. But I would like to see her do some charities and funding to help other women in that situation, like victims of sexual assault. Like that would be really cool, and I hope that that happens. Oh, which reminds me of something else. Like, I was looking at the Association for Computing Machinery back at CSU, and it looks like they're more inclusive now with the ACMW, because that used to be ACMW or ACM for women, but they said in there's like, all are welcome, men and women, but like the purpose of it was specifically to encourage and foster more women getting into STEM, which is crucial because as I'm debating now, people are saying that women shouldn't even vote. Like, and that's just ridiculous. Like, are you a person? Do you breathe oxygen? Do you eat food? Do you love and have emotions? And do you, like, create life by, giving birth and pregnancy and all that? Like, okay, yeah, you deserve a vote. Give them a vote. My God. Like, why? Why would you take their voting away? And it's not everyone, thank goodness. But, like, there's been quite a few people popping up and be like, they shouldn't vote. They're too emotional. And as they're talking in all caps about something I said or a meme I did. It's like, okay, who's too emotional? All people have emotions. Whether we let that get the best of us and make, certain decisions off of emotions, that's how we learn. We learn not to do that sort of thing. But, it's just, we have a lot of problems to solve and we're solving them. I don't know. And actually, okay, good, yeah. It's like, I gotta start thinking about doing some chores, getting ready. Ugh, sorry, hold on. So, either way. Uh, but I really enjoyed the interview with Putin. I don't like that people in Ukraine are still blowing each other up and Russians are dying. Like, that's the other thing. Nobody really gives a rip about the Russian soldiers. Why is that? Are they some monsters, some demons, some gremlins? No, they're following orders. And same with the Nazis, they were following orders. There was tons of Nazis that weren't killing a bunch. Okay, that's a bad example because that was like, at that point it would be better to have been a deserter and like get out of there. And I know a bunch of people did. Like, they saw what was going on. Like, you know what? No. And I feel like that's us now. Like, if we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars in weapons to blow people up and destroy buildings and break stuff, then yeah, the rest of the global community is concerned and pointing fingers like, what are they doing? It doesn't take a genius, a rocket scientist, or any kind of scientist to be like, you know what? If we put a bunch of guns over there and tell them to keep fighting, they're gonna kill people, and then that's kind of our fault. Like, we're doing a proxy war through the Ukrainians. We're making them fight our wars. And why do we have wars? I'll repeat one other thing from that interview with Putin. Putin said back when he was talking to Clinton, he said, if Russia asked to join NATO, do you think we could? And Clinton stopped because he didn't even think about that. It was a blind spot for him. He had no idea. He was like, wait, that's a thing? That could be a thing? We could have peace tomorrow. And he's like, I think so. Trying to be optimistic and hopeful and not offend, the leader of another great country. Like, um, but then he came back later and said, you know what? No, you can't. And it's like, why? Why not? Why can't he join this club? Why can't Russia join this club and just have world peace right there? And then we would work together to fix things. We would have our governments way more intertwined. And you don't have to have like one global government, but at least global cooperation to where each country is in agreement with most of the stuff going on. So, And just that right there, because I've been saying that too, is like, have we tried to get Russia in NATO? And people lose their minds. They're like, that's the whole point of NATO is to not have Russia in it. It's like, do you hear yourself? You want to alienate a country because of what? Because of something that their parents and grandparents did? Like, okay, let's alienate America for killing all the natives and enslaving black people. Like, are we really going to throw stones in this glass house as we're breaking a bunch of ice? It sounds like glass. So, I don't know. Something to think about, but at the same time, I'm still going to vote Democrat because at the end of the day, going backwards with women's rights and voting rights and and killing people for nonviolent crimes and tax breaks for the wealthy and all of these things that it's still not good. And Bush did the 20-year war too. Like he put us in that. Bush, Cheney, his Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, all of them, like from back in my day. Anyways, ta ta for now. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.